So it is Damien from Marketing Food Online, and I've had a great amount of questions about this topic. So I'm going to show you exactly why renting or leasing a food truck may be a better option than buying one. Of course, if you don't have $100,000 in the bank, renting one was probably your better option, and we're going to talk about it right now. As I mentioned in the introduction, this video I'm going to give you some tips about getting your own food truck by renting or leasing it. When it comes to purchasing a food truck, there are a ton of variables to keep in mind. Definitely whether or not it's new or used. You can get a new one for anywhere from $50,000 or $60,000 and up. And you can get some used ones. Of course, it's dependent upon the age, the type of equipment that it actually has, the size of the truck, and many other variables. Anywhere from $20,000 or $30,000 or so, or even a little bit less, depending on the size, up to well over $100,000 as well. So if you don't have that kind of funds available tomorrow and you're wanting to start a food truck, renting one or leasing one may be a better option. So the question that I had on Marketing Food Online channel was in regards to, can you rent one or lease one? If you can, how much does it run, or how much can you get one for? Now, I can't give you a specific dollar amount, but I can give you a rough estimate. When you're renting or leasing one monthly, it's going to be between about $1,000 to potentially $3,500 or even more a month. Now, some rent or lease contracts can allow you to lease it till you purchase it or own it. Other ones will go for 6 months, a couple of months, or even up to a year, totally dependent upon the type of contract you write with the company you're leasing it from. Now, there are companies throughout the U.S. that actually rent and lease specifically food trucks. Now, if you want to rent one and it's not in your state, it's still something that you can definitely do. They actually have the capacity to either flatbed it, they can bring it to you and deliver it, or you can go to that state and simply drive it back to your own state, totally dependent upon how the company that's leasing and renting it, how they operate their business. Now, it's always best, of course, if you find one within your state at least. That way you're not traveling halfway across the country to pick up or rent a leasing of a truck. So how much, I'm going to go through a handful of great tips and pointers. How much does it cost? As I just mentioned, it could be anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 a month. Now, when you write a contract and you enter into a contract with a company to lease a food truck, they may have you pay based on daily, weekly, monthly, or even every 2 months or 3 months at a time. Most contracts are written where you're going to rent it, like most any type of contract that you enter into when it comes to renting or leasing property or renting of that type of products, it's going to be up to a month at a time. Now, if you are looking to do that, there are a handful of things you need to be aware of. Now, from the perspective of the one renting it, I'm going to give you that perspective, maybe the things that you should really look for when you are looking into getting into a contract with a company. I'm going to go over just a few of those in right now, and we're going to talk about it. All right, so when it comes to the maintenance of the truck itself, traditionally that would be on the side of the owner of the truck, not the one leasing or renting it. Now, the one thing you definitely want to keep in mind is when you are signing the contract, you want to make sure that you distinguish between damages that you as the renter, the damages that potentially you can incur on the truck or the van or what have you, compared to traditional maintenance or maintaining the actual vehicle itself. The maintenance and then fixing something that's damaged, of course, are two totally different things. You need to work out who is actually going to be responsible for that within the contract itself, and that way there aren't any variables that may pop up as to who's responsible for that. And also what you want to keep in mind is when you enter into a contract, you want to make sure that there is a stipulation about mileage. Most of the time you want to, as a owner of the food truck, you sign an agreement with someone to rent it from you. You want to keep them relatively within the state. If they come to you and say, look, I'm looking to travel around the country, it's not just going to be within my state, then you need to make sure that it is spelled out based upon the type of mileage and how much you're going to allot them. Now, you could potentially charge them more if they exceed that. Normally, let's just say they write a contract and there's within a span of a month, they're allowed to travel 200 or 300 miles. Reason being is that most wear and tear on the truck is predominantly done to the truck based upon how many miles it's going to be used for. If it's kept within the state or even just within a county or city, that's a minimal amount of usage and wear and tear on the truck. So the person that's renting it to you will have the ability to kind of keep track of that to make sure that the truck is being maintained and that it's not being overworked or overused when you bring it back once the lease or the agreement is up. All right, so next up is the security deposit. Now, this is something that not every food truck company will have you agree to or even just bring up at all. But security deposits do come into play when it comes to unpaid parking tickets, if you've got damage that your insurance company doesn't necessarily claim as far as an insurance deduction or deductible. Those types of things are where security deposits may come into play, and they may ask for that prior to you actually taking possession of the truck. So you want to keep in mind that any additional expenses, there could potentially be a security deposit, but it is for good purpose. Now, the other perspective is from the company renting it to you. If you give them a couple grand, or if it happens to be $1,000 in security deposit, that would motivate you as the renter to take care of the truck in order to get that safety deposit back. And of course, that's a no-brainer if you want to get the money back. So the other thing you want to keep in mind is obviously the insurance factor. And most of the time, the company that owns the truck itself will leave it up to the one renting it to make sure they have any additional supplemental insurance, anything that comes from general liability or workers' comp, because you, as the one renting the truck itself, have your own employees, and the company traditionally will have its own insurance policy to cover the truck. Now, they may actually include the insurance cost every month on top of the rent that you are actually renting. So whatever you may be paying, you want to make sure that you get that rectified and figured out in the contract as to what type of insurance the company is going to provide, and you as the renter of the truck, what kind of insurance you need to supplement or you need to come in on your side as far as that's concerned. So traditionally, that's something that the one who is renting the food truck will have to get for themselves, especially when it comes to like workers' compensation and those who are actually working for the company. All right, so the other thing that I wanted to touch on is licensing. Now, normally what will happen is the company that owns the truck, the county in which that truck is registered, they're going to have and hold the permits and such licensing specifically for that county. Now, if you're looking for any type of additional outside of that county, if you're functioning, you may have to have, and this varies by state, county, and even the city, is that you as the operator, if you're going to operate the food truck in a separate county or city, there could be the potential that you would need to come up with the permits in order for you, or licensing, in order for you to operate that truck in another county where it is not actually licensed. Okay, and as you may or may not know, most food trucks actually utilize commissary or commercial kitchens to prep their food prior to going to an event. Not most of the preparation is done on the truck. The final bringing together the ingredients when you're cooking it for your customer who is standing outside of your truck, that is normally what happens when you are on the food truck. So with that in mind, and when you're renting or leasing a truck, you may want to double check to see how useful a commissary, of course, and commercial kitchen will be for you. And what's great about it is that there's not any fees involved in the parking and the keeping of your truck at those locations for the most part. You want to double check with those commercial kitchens and commissaries. They're not required by law in every state or city or county, so that varies. But in most cases, it makes sense that you have one dedicated to the truck that you're using, so you're not constantly changing different kitchens, or you're not having to find one or travel around and try to find parking for a truck, even when you're trying to prep your food for your next event. So lastly is going to be obviously something that I touched on briefly in the beginning. It's going to be the payment, the actual amount, the amount that you and the company come to an agreement on. Now, in order for you to forecast that, it's a bit of a challenge, and it would be something that you need to sit down and really think about. Because if a company tells you it's going to be about $1,000 a month, then you need to figure out between day 1 and day 30, how many events are you going to go to, which events you're going to go to, and so on. There's a lot involved in figuring that out. So don't get yourself signed into an agreement where you think off the top of your head really quick that you can make that. I can definitely pay $1,200 a month, $2,000, without having a plan as to how you were going to achieve that. So make sure you do that before you sit down. And what's great is most of these companies are really friendly and really easy to work with. They're going to give you some ideas on if it's your first time, or if it's something there you had a truck and now you're wanting to rent one. You want to work with them in detail as to what it's going to cost, and that way it's going to give you a really good determinant as to figuring out how much am I really going to need to make, and then that way you can plan your business out as well. So with that being said, I hope those tips give you a little bit of understanding on how to rent and lease a food truck and some of the variables that may come into play. And then when you sit down to sign that agreement, you'll have a better understanding. And having more information, of course, always makes better decisions. So I'll see you guys on the next video. I appreciate you watching.